Welcome, guys, to the fourth episode of the Truth Seekers podcast. In this podcast, we are seeking truth and looking to where we can find it best. And on this episode, we are going to be talking about what is a man? What should a man's responsibilities be? Should he have responsibility? A few questions like that and many more. I have two guests on me today. They are, one's my brother and one's my brother-in-law, Cameron and Zach. And if you guys could introduce you guys yourselves real fast. Cameron, I'll have you start.
Like you mentioned, I am his older brother, Cameron Gill.
My name's Zach, married to his older sister. Moved down to Honduras not long ago. Up in the States for the majority of my life, and I've only been down here for close to a year now.
All right, let's start out with the first question. What, in your opinion, is a man?
We could start first off with where the word originates from, which originates from Adam's name. Adam was considered the first man, which indicated part of God. It indicated that he was taken off of part of God, and that's why he's called man or Adam. And that's the origin of the word man, meaning from God.
So if man is made in the image of God, we have to be caretakers of that responsibility as a man, because we are literally embodying God. So we have to have those same traits that God has as much as we can. Right? What do you guys think?
Well, I think if you're talking about embodying the traits that God has, obviously, that's something that, as men from our Creator, that's the point. I think about in the verse in Genesis chapter 1, verse 16, where God said, "And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth." So God created man in his own image. And in the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So, I mean, if you're thinking about it, God, after he created all these things, decided to create man. Something that was actually brought up to me earlier whenever I was pondering some of these topics was, what was God seeking by creating man? You know, what was he wanting? What was one of the things that Adam did in the garden? He walked with God. God had someone to walk with and to talk to. Kind of like a friend. You know what I mean? It's kind of interesting. I never thought of it from that perspective before. But, you know, you're not only just embodying those traits that God had, which Jesus was a good example of that, but you're also there as a friend to God, which means you need to be able to communicate with him, right? Like you said, walking with God, also embodying his traits.
Being his friend, what do you mean by being God's friend?
Well, what did Jesus say? If you love me, then keep my commandments. Would you say you probably love your friends?
Oh, yeah.
You would probably do things for them. So that's pretty much what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, when you're on an intimate level with God, or you're trying to do things in your life, and you have goals and you have these oriented things that you're pursuing that are in line with God's laws, you're befriending God. You're going out towards him and you're going closer to him. You are able to have more frank, I guess you could say, conversations. I mean, I think of your dad and my dad, when they're having these things, these discussions that are inside them with God, it's like the definition for, I think, was Jews, to struggle with God, right? Jacob
Being an Israelite.
with being an Israelite, to struggle. You know, I struggle with my friends all the time, you know, with either topics like this or what have you. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you're on an intimate level with them. And how do you do that? Like Jesus said, keep my commandments. keep these things that are laid down before you, which means you probably need to understand what that is.
Right. What, like with struggling with God, you're trying to understand him and why he does things in your life. And with your friends, you would try to figure out what is going on and figure out if you can help them at all. As I think we should do with God. I think we should really try to find things that we can help God with. I was thinking about what a man is, and it's kind of interesting because man has all these traits that you got to link together, because if they're not linked together, he's not a man, he's a male. And a male and a man is different because they have different characters.
So one of your other questions that you're going to ask in a minute is about masculinity, right?
You read the future, man.
Well, I am in the future, but what you just said nailed one of the definitions. So the definition that I was able to find for masculinity was qualities or attributes regarded as characteristic of men. One of the synonyms for masculinity is manliness, habits and traits that society considers to be appropriate for a man. I hate that definition because by that definition, at any point in time, it's a movable thing. It's not a definite thing. It's something that can be changed based off of how a society feels. But
right, it's not an absolute truth.
Oh, no, it's not. The word for masculinity in the Latin root meaning means worthy of being male. So it's not that you and me have XY chromosomes and that's what makes us a man. That makes us male. Masculinity is what is making us worthy of being male.
Right.
So it's not something you're born with.
No, it's something you gotta work towards. It's a goal.
Yeah.
It's like being a Christian. It's a goal as well.
Absolutely.
I think some good examples to what you were talking about are in Psalms. In the very first chapter of Psalms, there's 6 verses, and he starts in the first 3 by describing a godly man. And in the latter 3, he goes and he reverses the picture for us and shows us what an ungodly man would look like. And you can kind of see in those first 3 verses a description of how we could walk with God, how we could be God's friends. In the first 3, he says, "Blessed is a man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of the sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful." So we can see he starts by describing the walking process. If you go back to the origins of Hebrew, what that meant, walking, it meant to go from point A to point B. So it's the process of getting from one location to another. And he is describing that blessed are we that don't go from that first point where we originate to the point of the sinner. Instead, we are taking that path with God. We're walking with him. Then in verse 2 it says, "But he delighteth in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night." We can see that suddenly, we can see the friend part of it with God. We are delighting in his law. We're delighting in his word. We find pleasure in it. And then we move on to verse 3, and it says, "He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf also shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper." So we have different aspects in there. We got the aspect of not standing in the path of the sinners. To not stand in the path of the sinners in Hebrew meant to not participate, to not be part of it, to not be idle in that spot. We got to not sit in the seat of the scornful, which these words are to not sit is, sit would be yeshav in Hebrew. And it is to dwell or to remain sitting down in that position. But then we got the point that says, but he delighteth in the law of the Lord. And the word but, which they use there, is the piece that contradicts, that joins the two of them together. It is ki em in Hebrew. And it is used to separate the two, the first three verses, from the latter three verses, showing the contradiction. It shows, but suddenly, the positive side of it. He delights in the Lord. Then we have the piece that's important. He is firmly planted, indicating that we are firm in our beliefs, in our standings. And it shows a key piece that we're planted by the rivers. We are planted beside God, who is flowing by us, who is nourishing us through his word. And through that nourishment, we are putting on fruit in our season. We're always green. We are showing a positive effect in our life through being firm, planted beside God.
Right. So what I see in these verses, which is they are very good at describing what a man is. And it's interesting how it says they delight in the law of the Lord, which the law of the Lord is kind of absolute truth. It's things that if you don't follow, they will impact your life in a manner that you do not want it to impact your life. As maybe having an abortion, which is wrong and is not a law of the Lord. It's going against God's law. And we really have to delight in God's law, which is having children, which God made men and women to do that, which I'm not sure if I'm saying what this verse means, but I'm saying it in the way that I see it.
Yes, in these verses, it shows us that he is anchored, and it's very important to be anchored to something important, to a base, to a firm ground, because when you're anchored, kind of like the parable of the wise man who built his foundation on a rock, who built his house on a rock, it shows that you're anchored to that rock. The other important thing it shows us is a man's defined by his actions, by his activities. And it shows us what the positive activities for a godly man are. And through those activities, you can define what a godly man is.
We're going to have to really get to defining what a man is, because it'd be really interesting to see what we think and what we can come up to what a godly man is. But let's finish those other three verses. Did you finish them?
I didn't. I can finish them. The
Yes,
other three
please.
verses are, the ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff which the wind driveth away. So we suddenly see that the ungodly, in correlation, are not anchored and not stable. They flow and are blown away whichever direction the wind blows it. They can be led astray by the whims of other men, of other people. Then you move on to verse 5. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. It goes to show that because they can be blown around by their own whims, they cannot be firm in God's congregation. They cannot be firm standing and walking with the Lord. And then in verse 6 it shows, for God knoweth the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish. Because we are firm with the Lord, we are communicating with him, and we are walking with him, he knows who we are. That's why there is a verse that indicates that the sheep shall know their master. This is just the opposite of it, and it's saying the master knows his sheep. When we walk in the Lord's path, when we do his will, he can recognize us as his sheep through our actions and activities. And he can say, yes, this is one of my sheep, this is one of my chosen, because he is doing my will in his life.
And I think other people can actually see if you're a godly person or not by your actions. That's what everyone should be defined as, or I can't find the right word, but that person stands for what their actions are. And then it says, by the way of the ungodly shall perish, which is very interesting. Like, if someone is ungodly and doesn't follow truth and goes against God's laws, there's no other way but perishing.
I believe that part of the verse will go along with one of your questions you have later on that we can bring up.
I'm not sure if we should continue on to another question or try to define what a man is more.
Now,
like a leader.
could be on that topic for a long time, because if you're talking about, because now you're not just defining the man, you're saying, okay, what are the characteristics of a good man? You know, I have a quote here that I wrote down. It said, the lives of great men all remind us we can make our own lives sublime. And departing, leaving behind us footprints on the sands of time. Now, essentially, what's that meaning is that we look around, we know, like, as guys, we can look around, we have guys to look up to, you know, whether it be our fathers or we have men that we look at and we're like, that is a man. Now, we look at those qualities and characteristics, you can see the path that they followed, and you can follow in their footsteps behind them. Now, when I think about that, I think of a book called The 4 Pillars of a Man's Heart. I can't quite remember the author. I'm reading his book right now, but he's got 4 pillars that he says every man should have. A king pillar, a warrior pillar, a mentor, and a friend. And each one can be defined even further to like vision, strength, wisdom, and love. So, I mean, there are things when you look at, like you said, you need to have wisdom in this. You need to be, you know, looking in the future. You need to be able to have love, but you also have to have strength, because as men, we're leaders, we're protectors of our family, of the people around us, the weaker vessels, whomever they may be. We have responsibility. But we need to be able to understand in humility what our goals and what our purpose is as men. What is our role? And is that kind of what you're asking? What is the role of a man? It's not just XY chromosome, right? There's more to it. So what more are we looking for?
Okay, then what do you think is the role of a man? What do you think a man should act like? He needs to be a leader in his home, because otherwise his family will be disorganized, and then his fruits will not be very productive in their own way and very successful.
And if he doesn't, there's a vacuum, and that vacuum has to be filled. And whether that means that if, say, I'm responsible for a certain thing, I don't do it. My wife is probably going to have to do it if it's in a serious thing, which means she might be resentful to me because I'm not taking my responsibility as a man to do a job. And you could almost lay it out as anything, but let's just say a leadership. Because I am a man, I'm married, maybe I should be in a leadership goal. I should be out working or providing in some way. That's what God gave Adam. You know, that was his duty. So if I don't do that, my family's not provided for. There's a vacuum. Something has to change, or my family will not exist.
Right. Plus, if there is nothing there to fill that void, there's going to be other generations that don't have men. What's happening right now, pretty much, because now there's almost no godly men in the world, that this feminist group came out and is kind of destroying the world. It's messing up what the economy should be. And I'm not saying that women shouldn't lead either. I'm saying that men aren't leading, so women are taking that role, and it's not being very pretty in the end, because women are more agreeable. For one, they also are the ones that make sure everyone has something, which if you think about that, you can't really have that, because then there's all these organizations like BLM and the homosexualities movements, which aren't very good because you are being put forward without showing that you're worth it.
Exactly. And of course, we have other problems today with the food that we eat that lowers our testosterone levels. We have other problems with surgeries that can be done that literally change your hormone levels to the point where it's totally confusing. No one wants to be able to tell you. I mean, as a kid right now, if I was in certain countries, if I had my child, I wouldn't be able to tell him if he's a male or a female. He would have to figure it out himself. Like, if you don't have some of the basic understandings of the fact you're born a male or born a female or a boy or a girl, you can't make those decisions. How are you supposed to even step up to the plate for what the world's about to throw at you if you don't even know your basics, or if you have no way of going through it and the world just wants to confuse you? You know? I mean, man was made in the image of God. What is Satan's end goal? To destroy the image of God. And the best way that he can do that is he confuses things even down to the core of whether you are male or you're X or you're Y or whatever the other terms are.
He's literally going in and grabbing the truth and throwing it out. That's what he's doing.
Make a mess of it.
Yep. And let's go to the next one. Oh, well, the next one is, how can we be a man of God? I think we kind of answered that already. What do you guys think? Do you guys have anything else to add there?
Well, if you want to look into it more, you could always look into David. I mean, obviously Christ is the ultimate example, right? But he is the Son of God. So if you want to look at a person who's a man, or I could say a man's man, you can look at David. You know, he made mistakes, he made these things, but he was also quoted as being a man after God's own heart. And you'd have to ask questions as to why. Obviously, you don't want to dive into it too deep, but just put that thought out there. You know, why? Why was David put into those positions? You know, he was a king, he was a warrior, you know, he was those things. He came up from pretty much nothing to being a ruler of a kingdom, and his son successed him, also had that.
David is a good example because the reason he is described as such a great man is because whenever he did something wrong, he was willing to be responsible for his actions, and he would always go to the Lord and take responsibility in his actions. And not only would he change and ask the Lord for forgiveness for his actions, he would take the responsibility of the consequences of what he did and deal with the consequences. And that's an important piece for being a better man. When we step up to our decisions in life and take responsibility for our decisions, and we don't shrug off our consequences, sometimes they can be painful. Sometimes we can make poor choices in life because we are men and we don't know everything. And when we decide to be responsible for those mistakes we create and step up to that responsibility, we are being better men for that action and that decision.
Right. And we're noticing our errors, which is also very important, because if you don't notice that you're making mistakes, you can't fix them. Everyone makes mistakes. But if you don't step in and say that you made that mistake, you're not going to try to fix it later on.
That's why David's prayer is a very important one when he says, Lord, help me remember the sins I have forgotten. That way he can remember them and he can fix them. He didn't say, Lord, forgive me for those sins which I have forgotten. He asked the Lord to help him remember them so he could take responsibility for them. And that's the difference between being a man and not being a man. If you ask the Lord to help you to remember your mistakes, and that way you can take responsibility for them, you're stepping up and you are accepting it. Whereas the reverse, if you just ask the Lord to forgive you for your mistakes, you are not willing to be responsible for them.
Do you guys have any more comments on this question? All right, then let's go to the next one. Are we missing a lot of masculinity in our day and age?
Yes.
I'm going to finish that one. And if we are, what do you think the reason is? And how can we help boys to become men?
Yes.
Good answer. We're done.
Well, I mean, it's not really just one thing, is it? That's taken away. I mean, you have attacks from the United States government currently is, attacking the religious Christian religion to a whole other level. I mean, if you think about it from just forget the vaccines and mandates, you have these things in school where you're not really able to have freedom of speech or freedom of choice when you're wanting to pray over your food in school. They don't allow you to do that. And so you have these restrictions that are imposed upon you at a young age. Not to mention that I said before, you have these foods that, kids are supposed to eat in these things, but they have no idea what it does to them at a young age. We have all these problems with processed foods that have been proven to throw you into a loop. Like, why are young boys growing man boobs? All these other things. It's not because they're not working out or they're not moving around. I mean, it can be diet, exercise, some of the basics. Not even talking spiritual yet. But do you think it's a lack of goal-oriented society?
That'd be interesting if it was, because goal-oriented society would be a society that has goals and tries to fulfill them.
We were just watching a video on Jordan Peterson where he was in a boxing club that took in young men in lower class society neighborhoods and trained them to box. But they had specific rules and things that they followed, that they went through there. And respect was one of them. And being able to encourage the other person was one of them. These were like qualities that they required if you were going to be in these boxing things. And, Jordan Peterson talked, and this as well. You have to have goals. You have to work towards those goals. And it's a surprise you don't. But if you don't have those, I don't care how much money you have no meaning. Goals and these things can start giving you those steps towards the meaning. But if you have confusion and chaos all around you from you don't even know what sex you are because you're confused, your hair is long, so maybe you're a male, female, XY chromosome, who knows what you are, right? And you're confused about it. Now that's a whole other, now you go all the way back past step one. Now you're, negative one, trying to figure this out. And so you're losing the masculinity by the confusion of the world around you.
It's very important to put goals in your life, just because it does put meaning in your life. It does give you something to look at and to aim at. And if we don't, we're going to be wandering fools. The little lost boy, pretty much. That's what we're going to be.
You're going to have no male role models, which is also another problem today.
So an interesting thing to notice, it's not that we're dealing with something new in the lack of manlyhood. If we look at history, which a very important comment that I have noticed is a dangerous man is a man who knows history, which what it means is we can first off know what the history is, and then we can, through knowing history, we can avoid problems that happen in history. If we look at what I think is the oldest case I can think of right now of lack of manlyhood is in Sodom and Gomorrah, where there was a great lack of manlyhood. And it goes to show that through wickedness and the society crumbling apart is when you start losing manlyhood and it starts dwindling. Another good example is Rome. When Rome started collapsing and there was a lack of manlyhood, it was through wickedness that happened. And it shows that the more wicked the country is, the more we walk away from God, the more we lose that manlyhood, that connection to who we really are. Because when it's said manlyhood, it goes in correlation with God, as we have already seen in a lot that we talk about. So when we start walking away from Him, it will show that we are losing that manlyhood because of that. We are losing the responsibilities that God puts in us. And that goes with the last question you mentioned. What are some of the skills that men should know? Through those skills, it kind of ties in manlyhood, which a really good one is accountability for your actions, responsibility. Because when we start becoming responsible, accountable, it helps tie us into that stronger foundation. It helps give us a firm foundation in who we are, which helps us to be more manly and godly. It goes in correlation with those four pillars that Zach mentioned. The king. What is a king? He is a leader. He steps up and leads those around him, which goes in correlation to actually women. What was Eve created for? She was created to be man's helper. But an interesting thing is, when you look at her name, who she is, it actually in Old Hebrew means to be the negative against man. Because by ourselves, we lack that key piece that drives us, which is the woman behind us. And that's why they say behind every great man, there is a greater woman, because she is the one who is the negative to our negative actions, who makes us a better man. And through her guiding us and helping us to be better men, we become the king, the leader. And then we got mentor. Every man should have a mentor, should look, they become a better man. Through their actions, they become a better man because of being a mentor. Then we got the warrior. What does the warrior indicate? The warrior means somebody who is not sitting in his grandparents' basement playing video games. He is somebody who is confronting the problems in life. He is standing up to those problems, and when he sees those problems, he tells the world around him that's not acceptable. A good mentor, a good example for that is Moroni. When he makes the banner, he saw a problem. He saw a lack of responsibility in them. The kingdom was taken over by the enemies, and he went not to the rest of the soldiers, but he went to your common Joe, the people of the community, and he told them, hey, we got a problem here. We got wicked men who suddenly took over our country, and we got to be responsible men, and we got to do something about that. That's why mentors are important. And then we got the friend aspect, which we talked about in the beginning, being friends with God. When man was created to walk with God, to be his friend, tying those four together. And when we tie those four together in our life, that ties in the manlyhood and how we become men and manly. When we are missing those pillars, if you think about a vehicle missing one of its four tires, you just can't drive down the road. Try to drive a vehicle down the road without all four tires. You're not going to get very far. I noticed the other day there was actually an accident, or you could say very close to an accident. We have leaving our closest city an S curve that is downhill, and the guy lost his front tire on the passenger side. And when we drove past the incident, he was about to go off the cliff. You could see marks on the pavement of the metal dragging on the pavement. Like you could see, like the metal had cut grooves into the pavement, and the car was about to go off a cliff because he was missing his one pillar, his one front tire. When you miss that, you are doomed to go off the cliff. You're doomed to catastrophe. And that's why you need those strong four pillars for manlyhood to be a better man. And that is showing in our society through wickedness that men are missing those pillars. And that's why it's evident that there's catastrophe and there's downfall through those lack of responsibilities and actions.
Right. I would really like to go through each of those pillars section by section, but I've never read the book, so I don't know anything about it. Like,
it's been a while since I read the book. I have been through it. Zach's been through it. I think every man who wants to be a godly man should go through it. So you'll be more relying on Zach than me because he has more recently been through the book than me.
Right. Yeah, because those pillars are very important. I might have to make series.
I'd say it'd be a podcast on its own, just going through that.
Because what's interesting, Colin, is if you look at that, what's the opposite of a king? Tyrant, right? What's the opposite of a warrior, especially in a household? Domestic violence. I turn my own warrior against my own family. You know, what's the opposite of a mentor? Someone who's cocky, who's like, you're so stupid, you can't do that. You know, you're going against it. And the same with what's the opposite of a friend. You have these pillars, but you have to understand these pillars, if unchecked, can go against you. It's like having the wrong size tire on your vehicle, right? That could really go against you. It's like having a
tire on it.
Has one straight, one curve. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so that's why it's important to think about those pillars, but also think of the opposites of them. I got one that was actually pretty good that I got out of Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 11 through 12. Wisdom is good with inheritance, and by it there is profit to them that see the sun. For wisdom is a defense, and money is a defense. But the excellency of knowledge is the wisdom giveth life to them that have it. Which, I mean, that says a whole lot as to things that you probably want to have as a man. Not even just a man, just as a human being. You know, as you and me know, and I'm sure your brother, Cameron knows. Money, if you have it, when you have what they would call like an emergency fund, a buffer, it gives you a cushion from the world. If you get hit with an unexpected cost, an accident, someone's medical injury, something like that that has out-of-pocket cost, you have had wisdom before to save for that unexpected event. And this is comparing the wisdom to knowledge in that same way. If we have had conversations like this, we're talking about it. We're trying to build wisdom to find truth, right? Well, part of that is also finding knowledge, because truth is knowledge, right? That is part of the path to finding it. But once you have it, all of the unknowns, the chaos, suddenly starts clearing up. And that's what it's saying here. You're going to have it, and you're going to be glad that you have it, because there's not going to be anything that's going to be thrown at you that you're not going to be prepared for.
Right. So it's kind of, that's interesting because you, in the beginning, when Adam named all the animals, he went through and named all the animals. Yes, the animals were there, but they weren't there till he named them. And you can't really find problems until you name them either. Like a savings account, you can't really do anything about when you have a problem like that until you know that there's such thing as a savings account. Because You didn't know that till someone named it for you. And if you name all those specific things, you have a big advantage over everyone else. You're going to have truth. You're going to have things in your life that can actually impact your life into the better. Maybe wearing steel toe boots at a job site or going barefoot. You didn't know any shoes existed, but you go barefoot at a job site, you're going to have you're going to have metal in your feet, which hopefully isn't fun. But it's finding those things like a bed instead of a rock to sleep on. If we go out and find those things as men, we're going to have a better life. There's no way we can't have a better life with finding those things.
What is the saying? A wise man learns from others' mistakes. Cameron pretty much said the same thing about the most dangerous man is the one that has known history. He knows and he's dangerous because he's learned from the past. He's reflected and he has taken into account mistakes that have happened.
So a good example to a character in history who had that buffer, who had, you could say, that savings account is Job. Because when we see Job's life and catastrophe came to him, problems came to him in life, I mean, he got pretty much the worst end of the deal. He lost all his possessions. He lost his family. He broke out in body sores throughout his whole body. He was miserable. His friends turned against him. His friends went as far as telling him that because of all the catastrophes that happened in his life, it was evident to them that he had strayed from God, because they claimed that a godly man, God always blesses and they never have problems in life. They turned against him and accused him of straying from God. So he has all this negative that happens through him, but we see in his life that he had that savings account. We see that no matter what happened to him, he stayed firm. He had that anchor. And no matter what catastrophe came to him, he stood firm on that rock and didn't sway. The winds didn't blow him back and forth like it talks about in Psalms, about the winds blowing the wicked man asunder. He was strong and firm on his foundation. We can see that he's a good example of having a strong foundation. And through his actions of being a strong foundation, after all his tribulations, God came back and blessed him more than what he originally was blessed. So it shows that sometimes we will have difficulties, even when we are strong and firm, when we are on God's side. And sometimes it may look like maybe the Lord has abandoned us, but maybe he is just testing us to make sure that our pillars are built on a strong foundation. Maybe he is just shaking the boat to see that we are really still on his side, making sure that we still are with him through good and bad. And once we have gone through those troubles, he comes back and blesses us for being strong and firm. It goes a lot with a poem that I don't know who wrote it. I don't know if anybody knows who wrote it, but it is a well-known poem. And there was this guy walking on the beach one day, and he looked at his footprints in the beach, and he noticed that there were areas where there were two sets of footprints, and there were areas where there was one set of footprints. And he asked the Lord, how come you said you would be always there with me, but through my most difficult points in life, I see that there's only one set of footprints? And in the poem, the Lord says to him, through those points, I actually carried you through those struggles. And through those struggles, sometimes we don't actually realize that how much the Lord helped us and carried us. And if we did not have him on our side, how much worse it would be off for us through those difficult times when we have, for example, a family member of ours dies, or we have a family member of ours that is diagnosed with cancer and they are going to die, something fatal, or we have an accident in our vehicle coming back from work. Suddenly we're driving back from work and there's this great accident. We don't realize in those moments how much worse it could be when we don't have the Lord on our side, and we just realize the catastrophe, and we can think that the Lord has abandoned us, when really that catastrophe could have been much worse, and it could have been 100 times more negative if we wouldn't have had him there backing us up.
Right. It's like learning how to ride a bike. You can't learn how to ride a bike till you fall down like 500 times. It's just a simpler form of what you're saying. It's you can't you can't be a better person until you fail. There has to be failing in your life, or you can't learn what failing means. It's like one of the scriptures in the Bible. It says you can't really know what light is until you know dark. And I think that's why God really puts us through those dark times, because he's trying to teach us something there. Even if it hurts, we still need to go through and think about them.
What age would you be defined as a male? As a man? What age is it? Different for each culture, right?
Right. What is the correct age, though? Because in the scripture,
Is there a correct age?
In the scripture, it really goes to the age 20. It talks about being a man at age 20.
Where is that one?
Well, I don't think a man is really based on his age, because how can you base a man on his age? Like,
You
there
base
are
it off
men-
maturity level, right?
right, exactly. Because there's men that are 30 years old and still in their mothers and fathers' basements playing video games, which that is not a man. He's not responsible. He's not being very caring about anything. He's not having the 4 pillars in his life, which are some of the most important things out there.
An interesting thing to see is how each culture out there has traditions for becoming a man. You can see in the Indians in the US, when the young boys would hit roughly 16 years of age, they would give them a hunting knife and send them out to the wilderness, and they had to survive on their own through their own skills in the wilderness. And based on their beliefs, if the man, or in that instance, if the boy could survive out in the wilderness for X amount of time and then come back to them, they considered him a man after that. And those that couldn't survive would die, and they wouldn't come back. You could call that natural selection. They were weeding out the weaker boys who would never be men and who were more sissy, because in a lot of societies in the beginning, a man would survive because he was a warrior.
Right,
So-
and I think
I like that. Oh, sorry.
go for it.
I like that because it actually makes me think of another one. The book that I talked about earlier, The 4 Pillars of Man's Heart, was on the reading list for the man class when I went through it. It was a youth camp that was held in Missouri. And part of the topics we talked about was actually a tradition that the Native American Indians used to do in some of these tribes. One of them was to enter into manhood, the boy would go out into the wilderness and he would be blindfolded and he'd be left there alone all night. He wasn't allowed to take the blindfold off. and he would have to sit there all night, and then in the morning he would take the blindfold off, hearing all those things, the critters, the creatures, and you're not able to do that. What he didn't know is that his dad was sitting right there next to him. So yes, it is to weed out the weak, but it's also, as men, to be able to strengthen that which is weak. You're only as strong as your weakest point, right? But you're not a single thing. It's not about just me. The great men never think of just themselves. They think of a team. They think of a family. They think of a nation. Those things that are put in front. And actually, what we were talking about earlier made me think of difficulties in life, right? I am reading a book called War Stories, and it's a book by a U.S. Navy SEAL who went up. Quotes from him because he did a video on YouTube talking about making your bed and the importance of that. This is some of his memoirs. He talks about going through the Navy SEAL training program, which is one of the more rigorous training programs that I know of. I'm sure there's plenty of them out there. But he talks about specifically Hell Week. Hell Week in this program, they are kept awake for 5 days straight. They're constantly doing activities, things to break your spirits. And guys would drop out left and right. And he said the reason that they did is because thinking about surviving for that whole week was too much for them. They couldn't imagine it. And the way that you survived through that was you took it one event at a time. You never really looked ahead until it was over. And, there's points in our lives as men. I'm kind of in that right now. I cannot look that far ahead. I need to look and finish the task in front of me that day. And as I keep completing it, I'll get through that, Hell Week. And I thought it was a very interesting insight, having not gone through something like that before. I've gone through an academy before to be a firefighter, but it was definitely not as rigorous as the training that they went through.
Right, and in the end, you're going to be a better person, which is very interesting because you got to go through all that trouble to really be a better person. Also, another point that I was going to make is, Cameron, you made this point, which was being independent. On that story of having those kids go out there and seeing if they could come back all by themselves is kind of making sure they can be independent in life, because a man has to be independent in some manner or form, whether it's his money. He cannot depend on his parents forever. He has to depend on his own work. He has to depend on his own labor, his own skills, because if he cannot depend on himself only, being independent, he depends on other people, and he's very vulnerable in that manner. Plus, he cannot succeed as greatly if he depends on his parents for sustaining his life. For a family member to make sure he keeps his job because he doesn't work right, there's this independence that needs to happen in most cultures, and it's not happening.
We can see great examples throughout the biblical stories of that independence. A good one to start with is Abraham. When his story starts dialoguing in the Bible, when we start reading about him, the very first thing that the Lord tells him is to get out of your parents' home and to go, and I will make you a great nation. So he is told to become responsible, to stand up, and to get out of his parents' basement, to quit playing video games, and through those actions, I will make you someone great. We can see other examples. We can see Joseph when he is, granted, it's a slightly different scenario because he's kind of forced out because his brothers sell him as a slave. Through that action of leaving his parents' home, we see that he becomes a great leader in a foreign nation. He becomes the second one in command. He is blessed through standing up and being responsible. Another example is when Jacob leaves home. Granted, that example also, he's leaving home because he is fleeing from his brother because he played a dirty trick on his brother and he was crooked with his brother. But he leaves home to live with another family member. And through leaving home, we also see him become successful and great. That's why when the Lord talks about marriage, he never says that the lady, the woman leaves her parents. It is always the man leaves his parents and joins to his wife, because he has to step out of his parents' home. He's got to leave them, stand up, go, be responsible, and then he marries her.
Do you think a man should step out of his house, like move out in a sense, before he gets married? Like, okay, so there's this man, I don't remember who it was, but he made a video. I don't even remember what it was about, but he mentioned that a man is not a man until he can move away from his father or his people that not influence his life, but people that he depends on. He can't, he needs to move away from them because he needs to go and teach them also, in a sense. Do you think that a guy has to move out before he gets married to be a real man? Not like move out of a house, because that's different. And there's always circumstances that don't let you.
So the important piece isn't necessarily to move out of his parents' house. The important piece is to see what the action is covering. What the action is covering is the character is being told to abandon that which he is most attached to. And usually that which you are most attached to is also that which is the worst for you, the most negative for you. So you are being told to take action in standing up and abandoning that which you are attached to the most. And in abandoning that, it gives room for growth. And if your family is what is that negative aspect, because there are scenarios out there where the family is the negative one. You can have a mother who thinks that her boy is her baby and she treats him like her baby, even though he's a grown adult. And yes, for you to become a man, you have to leave your mother. You have to go abandon her so you can become a man. But there are other instances where there are other stuff that are keeping you a child still. It could be video games that are keeping you a child. There are a lot of stuff, and each person can be a little different, which is keeping you still a child, still keeping you from responsibility. What it is something in your life that is keeping you from becoming a responsible human being that causes you to be that child. And when you abandon that key piece in your life that's keeping you from being responsible, you can suddenly become responsible. You have the opportunity to be a man. And until you can identify what it is in your life that is slowing you down, that is tying you down from that key piece of becoming responsible, you can never grow up and become a man.
I think of a scripture verse that kind of puts it fairly simply. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 11. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. That's essentially what you're asking. But if you're moving outside the house, that's an outside view of you taking responsibility. I'm no longer letting my parents pay my bills, do those things. I'm taking out that. I'm moving forward. So I guess it's part of the process. Is it necessary? Maybe not. Maybe you're matured enough to be able to do that, but it's definitely a sign on the outside. I mean, ask attractive young lady who's at least educated, who's someone that you would be interested in, if she'd be interested in you if you were living at mom and dad's house. Probably not. And there's reason for that, because
Yeah.
she needs someone who takes initiative, who can provide, who's intelligent, equal to her or greater than her. And if she's already moved out and she's making her own living, then why in the world would she need you? I mean, that's just a simple thing when we're just talking about dating and marriage and those things that find a mate attractive. Probably not living at home is one of them, with your mom and dad.
Plus, it's really interesting
Women
how
look for stability in men.
right. That's interesting. Plus, a man is actually pushed out of his boundaries when he has a woman in his life. Like you guys said earlier, having that crush, or I hate using the word crush because I don't like it, but having that girl that you like really pushes you beyond that because you really want to impress her, and you want to be that man for her, which is interesting.
She pushes you higher.
That's just it. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
And then you said something about sacrifice, which was interesting. Do you think a man has to sacrifice a lot, or like, I mean, you said that he needs to move away from the things that make him comfortable? Not comfortable. I don't remember how you phrased it, but you said that he has to move out of things that accommodate him or something. And sacrifice is key to that.
He has to come disassociated with the things that tie him down, with the things he likes the most, because they a lot of times tend to be the most negative for him.
Okay, like money. He really needs to disassociate him with himself, like having that personal relationship with money, or like wanting all the money or being rich. He has to move away from that.
If money is his primary focus, yes, because it is impossible to have money as your primary focus in life and actually have a functioning, working relationship with another human being, because you are focused too much on money. The amount of effort money requires for you to chase after it and to become successful negates the amount of time you have to spend and to focus on that other loved one. And that is why suddenly it is a negative aspect. It's not to say that money is bad and you shouldn't go after money, because money is necessary for all your necessities in life. You just got to be able to balance it so that it is not more important than other more key pieces in your life, like loved ones.
Or like going after meaning or a goal in particular.
Well, I mean, we have it. I can't remember the exact passage, but I heard it the other day in the Book of Mormon. And it talks about, if you're seeking the kingdom of God, you have to go through this process, right? But after you've found it, if you seek riches, you will also find that. But you'll be seeking it for the right reason, for doing things that are right. And it goes through the list of those things that you can do. It's not wrong to seek those things that could provide you with even worldly wealth, right? But it's having that knowledge and understanding of what you're going to do with it, because it is a tool, but that tool can be used incorrectly, and it can use to be corruptible. I mean, it can corrupt many men. It has corrupted many men wealth. So focusing first on God and getting those things that are important for your spiritual health and well-being, and then looking on those things that are carnal.
Right, and looking on it daily, because you need to look on God's laws daily, which is very important.
Absolutely.
It makes you make sure that you aren't putting as much attention on money or any of those things that can bring you away from God.
Money should never be a central focus of a godly man. We can see examples in the Bible where men that put God first got blessed afterwards with riches, because God's not against us having riches and being successful. The thing is, he wants us to first focus on important pieces of life. We can see Abraham. God told him to take this insane journey that nowadays we can't really fathom because we have planes, we have boats, we have cars that make that journey much shorter. So we can't really fathom his home all the way down to Canaan and then all the way down to Egypt and back up to Canaan, following that path that the Lord told him to take, which after he did that, we see in his life that God made him successful. We see that God blessed him greatly, but he didn't focus on the riches. He focused on what the Lord told him to. We see, for example, Jacob, another example, him being blessed once he put the Lord first. We see how much the Lord blessed Job and how successful and rich he was. But he first put the Lord in his life. We see David. David had to leave his country. David had to leave his family, maybe never to see them again, because he put the Lord first. And the king who had walked away from God was not happy with that and pursued him for his life and wanted to kill him. So David had to flee his country and go to abide with his enemies and become his own enemy because he lived with his enemies. The Philistines were enemies of the Israelites. They were out to kill them. And he went and lived with them so that he could save his life. And through his actions, we see that later on in life, the Lord blessed him immensely and made him very prosperous. But none of them ever put riches, none of them ever put money as a goal in life. They all first put the Lord as a goal in life, and they did what God asked them to do. And the rest just came along as a blessing without them really having to search for it or seek for it. It was just the Lord saying, "Here, you have done what I asked you to, good servant. Now I will give you a blessing."
Right. It was like the parable of the talents. Jesus had this parable of the talents where he gave talents to well, it's the parable, and the guy gave talents to people, and one guy tripled it, I think it was. One guy doubled it, and the other guy put it in the bank. No, he didn't put it in the bank. He went and hid it. And then Jesus, in the end, made everything better for each one of them according to what he did. The guy that tripled it, he did triple again, I think. And then the guy that hid it, he didn't give him anything. He threw him into the lake of fire. He didn't get anything in the end, pretty much. Which is the same in life.
So to one he gave 5, to one he gave 2, and to one he gave 1. And the one that buried it because he feared his master and he knew that his master was a strict master, got punished for not doing anything with that talent that the Lord gave him. And he said, to he who shows much effort, to he who focuses much on that which I give you, on your responsibilities, I will bless you even more. He took the talent from the one who did nothing and gave it to the one who was the most responsible for that which he was entrusted with. And we see that in life, when the Lord entrusts us with responsibility and we are responsible with that responsibility, he can entrust us with even greater responsibility. And through us standing up to that and becoming responsible is how he blesses us, through those actions.
You explained that way better than I could, so thank you. Yeah, I didn't remember how many talents he gave away. Okay, so this is another question. How do you think a man should date? Is dating the right way for a man to go around finding that girl for him? And okay, that's a weird one. And I didn't put it in the questions, but Zach was talking about girls and how dating and all that, and I just wanted to bring it up. this could be another whole podcast, and I will be making a podcast on dating and relationships, but how should a man do it?
Okay, Colin, put yourself in a man's shoes. You're going to go on a date. How would you go about it? If you were thinking of your ideal guy, quality guy. Now, granted, one of us in this table has 2 daughters. So he can probably put it in a perspective of, if I was going to allow my daughters on a date, these are expectations I would hold and hope that the man holds, right? But put yourself in those shoes. What would you do on your date? What would you say would be okay and not okay? So is it okay to go out and spend the night out underneath the stars, just looking at the stars? You don't even have to be sleeping out there.
No, because
But
then it
maybe
can have a
it's
bad
just you and
outcome.
I.
It can have a
Could
bad
have a bad outcome.
influence. I mean, it's not the
But
right way to
it
go
could have an
around it.
appearance of.
Yes, exactly.
Essentially, what I was trying to say is you need to also think of honoring the woman that you're going out to date. And obviously, it also means who you're going to go out on a date with. Are you going out with somebody who dates everybody and anybody, doesn't really care or have any moral standings close to what you're having? But hey, they're attractive, they're hot. And so they think I'm hot, they're hot, we'll go on a date. Yeah, probably not what you want to do, right? You want to find somebody who is able to hold a conversation with you and hold similar morals. Because in the end, if you're wanting to date for the purpose of marriage, you're talking about, yes, you do need to be physically attracted to this individual, I feel. But more importantly, you and this person are going to hate each other through the rest of your guys' lives. You guys are going to go through hard times. So have that be part of your process when you're trying to date somebody, is to get to know them.
Right. It's kind of being friends before you ever date anyone.
Yeah.
I think we have been fed a picture, a lie that in correlation with God's standards, and the world has painted a picture that doesn't go along with what God believes in. The purpose of dating is because you want to marry someone and you want to start a life with them. We have the world painting us a picture of girlfriend and boyfriend, which essentially is, I want to have all the perks of a married couple, but I do not want to be responsible, which goes completely against being a godly man. Because the key piece of being a godly man is responsibility. And that's why girlfriend and boyfriend picture is so wrong, because it goes against everything that the Lord asks us to do in becoming a godly man. So when I decide I want to marry because I want to have a family, I want to have a significant partner that I want to share the rest of my life with, my difficulties, my struggles, my ups and downs, my good times, that's when you start searching for someone. And that's where dating comes in. And when you date someone, you are wanting to learn who they are, you're wanting to learn their character and see what kind of person they are, to see if you would like to spend the rest of your life with. And we as people are very good at putting on an act for people when we are by ourselves. If I go out to a restaurant with a young lady and it's just the two of us, I can put on an act and an appearance that is nothing to be myself, so that she thinks I'm some great person out there and she really likes my character. But if I were to take her to my parents' home, especially several times, like I invite her to supper at my parents' home, she can see how I behave, how I act with my younger siblings, if I have any. She can see how I treat my parents. if I'm respectful to them, if I am helpful. If, for example, my mother asks me to wash the dishes after supper and I complain, I whine, or if I happily go and wash the dishes, and she can see my character and see if I am somebody who she wants to spend the rest of my life with, the rest of her life with. Granted, we're not perfect. So if we are out there looking for the perfect human being, we will never find them. We will see errors in them. But also, we will see that they might be small errors, small things that we can live with. And that as a couple, they will improve and we will improve in life. So when we talk about the aspect of dating, we got to realize what the reason is we're doing it for. And when we realize the reason we're doing it for, we want to look for the scenarios where we will see those reasons the best. If we're looking for an ideal couple, the best scenario is among other people, among their family, their friends, so we can see their character. Going to church events, because if we're a godly man, we will be looking for a godly woman in church scenarios. We're not going to be going out to the bar to look for a woman, because guess what? She might be pretty. She might be the prettiest person out there. But it goes to show against her character that she is in a negative situation, a negative environment, and she will not be a godly woman. The best is to look for a godly woman in a godly scenario. So we might go on a date with her to a church event, and we will see how she behaves or how he behaves in that church event. If we're a woman, how the guy behaves. If we're a man, how the woman behaves among other church members, how they treat other church members. And when we are among other people, we cannot put on a show, we cannot put on a picture, because those other people know us, those other people know them. So we cannot behave out of the ordinary, and then we can see if that person is somebody we really want to spend the rest of our life with. And if we are not searching to be married, to tie the vows and become responsible for another person, then we should not be dating, because we are not responsible enough for that. We should not be pursuing that, because that's not actually what we're looking for.
Right. So we should be looking at each other's morals and really going for morals, because morals are pretty much what constitute what they believe in. And if they can be careful about things that are very important in their life, like maybe taking care of children or being responsible, maybe washing the dishes or sweeping the floors, things like that that are small, but that matter, because it means you have a certain amount of responsibility. And morals are a big thing. And also you added that it has to be in a church environment, because that's where you want to be in, because that's who you want to be when you are older. And your kids, you want your kids to be in that environment as well. You don't want your kids to be drunkards in the road. But if you marry a woman that's a drunkard in the road or at a nightclub, well, a worldly woman, you're going to have kids that have this part in them that is worldly.
Well, you have another problem with that too. Now, is she influencing you to the good? You said morals. Think about it this way. Even if you are on a certain level spiritually and you want to marry this person who has no knowledge at all, has never gone to church before, and you don't care, you marry this individual. You just put yourself way back. Together, my wife and I are growing together in our knowledge of Christ and these things. We help each other as we go through it. But the opposite could be said to someone else. If I went through and I married somebody else who I was attracted to, did that, but they didn't want to go to church, I would not be where I am today, because that person would be weighing me down in different directions that are not where I wanted to go. So you have to think about that. Not only that,
but your kids probably are going to get mixed signals from their parents. Because if you guys aren't on the same direction, same boat, then they're going to be like, well, it doesn't matter because mom doesn't go to church, but dad goes to church. You know, you have a lot of those problems. You end up losing ground. You don't keep gaining that ground that you have been going for. You're looking for someone to go on this adventure with you, because it's an adventure. There's Bilbo Baggins going through. You are going to go out on an adventure. You know, am I coming back? Am I ever going to come back? You might, but you're not going to be the same. And that's the same thing you have to look at when you're going through a dating. You guys are going to change together. Now, you can look at each other real quick and be able to see really quick, is this individual helping me? Are they taking me to a higher level of accountability? Yes or no?
Also, another point, like if you go and date a girl if you date a girl that you don't have the right intentions of marrying them, you're going to end up having these feelings or this attachment to that person that when you separate, it's going to break you apart. But then next time, it's going to keep breaking you apart, and it's not going to be as strong as the first time. And that's what really matters, the first time of that bond. Cameron mentioned this one time, and I don't remember when, but he pretty much mentioned that you can't have a strong bond once you break it. It's like when you bend metal, you can bend it back in place, but it's going to be weaker. There's no way to make it as strong. And I think that's the same with dating and having relationships with girls.
So on that key you mentioned, it's actually scientifically proven that when we have intimate relationships with another person, we build bonds, we connect neural circuits through our brain. That's why in the New Testament, Jesus says that if you commit adultery even in your head mentally, you don't even do the action, you just do it in your head, that is the sin and is considered adultery. Because every time you make those bonds in your brain, those connections, and then you sever them, it gets harder to make them next time and to re-bond. So when you go on a date with a significant other one, but you don't have the right intentions in life, you bond together with that person. Something might click between you guys. You might not even have an intimate moment. You might not even kiss or do anything worse, but you guys will bond psychologically. And when you break that bond and then you go date someone else, there's that old bond that you had created and then broken that is extra baggage suddenly that your brain has in it, and you can't do anything with it. It's there for the rest of your life. And that's why you got to be so careful when you decide to take that step in life that you really are ready for it, because otherwise it's so easy to create these connections that you will sever and build up this baggage, so that when you get to the point that you really decide to marry someone, you got all this extra baggage that weigh you down and make it so much more difficult in life to become successful with that other person. That's why in the New Testament it says to not yoke two unequally yoked oxen, to not yoke unequally oxen together. What it's indicating is when you're going to tie the knot, to tie it with someone that's equal to you or a little better than you. When you tie that knot with someone that is much below you, you are not equally going up, like Zach said. You are suddenly going down to a different plane lower than you. And that person can maybe have different desires and goals in life than yours, which can pull you away from God. And it can be negative to that final goal you have in life. And that's why you got to be so careful when you decide to make that step in life that you are committed to it 100%, because there's no going back afterwards. Granted, the world will accept divorce and stuff, but there really is no going back, because you will always, for the rest of your life, have that baggage on you, and you can never get rid of it. It is with you for the rest of your life. So when you unwisely do that decision, when you don't think it through completely, and then you realize that you guys aren't equally yoked and you guys separate, if next time you want to marry someone else, you are potentially ruining that other person's life, because you have all this extra baggage, and it's not their fault that you have all this extra baggage. You bring all this extra stuff to the relationship. They do not deserve that. They deserve for you to bring 100%. And that's why you always got to know what you're getting into before you do it. And the other person also has to have the same goals in life.
I think something else that we didn't bring up that actually hits quite a few of those topics, one of the lack of masculinity today, things you're talking about with dating. I think one of the top things that is not talked about, because it is a sensitive topic, is the fact that pornography is extraordinarily easy access all over the place. And it is probably right now, especially with guys that I worked with, it's okay. And I'm here to tell you right now, it is not okay. It is something that destroys people. And if we as men who have had this struggle before and don't talk to some of the younger men about it, it is a hurdle that will kill you. It will kill your relationship before it even starts. It'll cause problems before it even starts. It may seem evil or easy, but it's like methamphetamines. Methamphetamine is a drug that you take once and you're addicted. And the human hormones and sexual organs and those things, it is addicting. It's made that way for reproduction purposes. And this has been manipulated against us in this way. And it is extraordinarily easy to access in that. And those things destroy men, destroy them. And I mean, the same can be said for women as well in other areas. But, I definitely forgot to mention about that. But that is definitely a huge topic that you could spend a lot of time on. But it needs to be said that it is a major role player in things that we have to stand up against. It's not okay.
An interesting thing on that of pornography, it requires 100 days of changing your life habits and replacing that negative piece in your life to overcome that addiction of pornography. The minute you use it, you immediately become addicted, like Zach said. It is so addicting. And then after you have succumbed to that addiction, it requires 100 days, almost 1/3 of a year, to overcome that addiction. Not only do you got to remove it from your life, you have to replace it with something positive and good. And if at any point in those 100 years, in those 100 days, you stumble, even for just a slight moment, that clock starts over again. And that is how negative it is for you. That is how bad it is for you. And it shows how easy it is to succumb to it, and how difficult after you just saw it or used it once, how difficult it is to remove it from your life afterwards and replace it with something good. And that is why you got to be so vigilant in your life to not have those negative aspects in your life.
I know a big thing with guys that try to get over that sort of thing is the fact that this isn't something you get over by yourself. You have to have someone who keeps tabs on you and helps you. And part of that is humility. Like, you have to be humble enough to accept the fact that you have a problem and that you can't get over by yourself, and this is making your life worse. You have to take responsibility for the actions that you have, and then take steps to get over it. And then suddenly your life starts looking a lot better. You don't have this shame, which it is. It's shameful and it's horrible because of how horribly addictive it is. We have software today. Facebook is a great one. They know exactly what you look at, what you like, seconds, milliseconds, just like that. So as soon as you start looking those things up, they start throwing advertisements out at you for things that are similar or like pornography. And just boom, 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 boom. I mean, they want to catch you. Your time on screen is their money. And that makes this process even harder. When my dad was growing up, it was magazines. You had to go to the store, you had to find someone who was over 18, and you had to go in there and they'd have to purchase it for you. It took a little more effort to be able to do it. Today, less than a couple seconds, you could probably get on your phone and figure it out. And it could be a child, it could be anything. You know, there's no security today. And that means we have to be even more aggressive towards that. And obviously, I'm extremely aggressive towards it because I had struggles with that growing up. And I know how dangerous it is. I know how horrible it is. And I don't want anyone else to go through that. But I guarantee you that a lot of people who do not speak up, young men that I know in the church, if they're having these struggles, they're ashamed to come up and say, don't be ashamed. Don't be ashamed. Everybody has problems and struggles. And what makes us stronger is being able to say, I have a problem, help me. We can't do this alone. And you have to push forward.
That is where one of the pillars comes in so importantly, the pillar of a mentor. Like Zach mentioned, with a lot of addictions, especially ones like pornography, you need to be open and vocal. You need to speak your difficulty, your struggle to a mentor, to someone who is wiser than you, someone who maybe has gone through struggles in life and come out the other side stronger, come out the other side of the struggle to them so that you can overcome it. It is not a battle you can fight on your own. And that's where that one pillar of a mentor comes in so importantly. When you have a mentor in your life who you can go to, someone you can trust and rely on and tell them you have these struggles and you need help to overcome these struggles. When it is a mentor who is looking out for your well-being, they can help you overcome it and become a stronger person once you have successfully gone through and removed those plagues, those diseases from your life. And in doing that, you make yourself a mentor for another person who might be struggling later on in life. You might have a younger person eventually come to you and you can become a mentor for them because you have overcome that difficulty and become someone stronger. And now you can help someone else in life with that struggle to become someone better.
Right. And just a weird question, but does it get easier after marriage? Because I know a lot of men think that it gets easier after marriage, that you won't feel this draw.
If you don't take care of it, I don't care where you are or what you're going to do. It's not going to get easier. It's going to get worse because what's going to happen now is compounding. All of a sudden, you don't have any urge to have any kind of interaction with your wife. Your wife starts thinking this is a problem with her. You see how this is going? You start having this effect. That's underlying effect in that relationship is that problem. It is that problem. It's rooted in there. It changes you. And so then you start going more towards your what you were when you were single. And then it starts getting worse. And then all of a sudden, guess what? I want a divorce. I mean, it could be money issues, it could be that issues, but underlying, if you have monsters in the closet you aren't trying to take care of it, you know they're there, they're going to come back to bite you, especially if you keep putting them off. They grow bigger in absence. I mean, Jordan Peterson has things and the parents don't see it. It can be anything, but the dragon gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until what? Until you said it, what Adam said with those animals, until you name it. You name those problems. And now it has a name to it. It has something. It's there. What do I do with it? How do I take care of it?
The only time it actually starts getting easier is once you are coming up to that 100th day. Because if you think about a good example is coffee. when you start going through withdrawal of coffee, you can see someone who's going through withdrawal. They start shaking. They start getting really nervous. When you find that addiction in your life, be it pornography, and you decide to fight it and to remove it from your life, it will get harder at first because you're going to start going through withdrawal. You're going to start getting these cravings for that addiction. And that's when it becomes the hardest because you got to overcome those withdrawals. You got to overcome those feelings at your body because they're chemicals in your body. Your body is creating these chemicals and you got to overcome those chemicals. And if you, for example, are married, you got to be open with your significant other one and tell them, I am struggling with this. I have this problem. Please help me to overcome it. If you're married and your significant other one loves you and wants you to be a better person in life, they will help you when you have that struggle. And for example, if you're married, they should be a mentor in your life. You should have more than one mentor, but they should be your primary mentor because you should be open and honest with them when you have struggles in life. Because they love you and they want the best for you, they will help you overcome it. They will help you overcome that problem. And if you are a young person that wants to marry and you have that struggle in life, you should be open to that person who you might want to date and tell them, hey, I really want to marry, but I got the struggle in life of pornography and I am fighting it. I'm trying to overcome it. And if you could please help me overcome it, if you're open with them and both of you guys are on the same path, looking to be better people, they will help you overcome that struggle in life. That way you are not going into marriage with baggage that they might not know of, because the key important piece in relationships and marriage is to be upfront and honest always. Because if you have hidden baggage, hidden skeletons in your closet, they will eventually come out. And if you were not honest and upfront with that person beforehand, it will make it much harder and worse later on after you're married. So you always have to be honest. You always have to be upfront with that other significant one, letting them know your struggles in life. They always got to be honest with you, letting you know their struggles in life. And yeah, the two of you guys might be struggling with the same problem. And as you guys work together, you guys can help keep each other in balance and help each other become stronger and better people and overcome that addiction.
City is made safe by a multitude of counselors, for sure.
And I think that's pretty much what we were going to cover today because I don't have anything else to say. And I'll just do a recap real quick. So a man is a king, a warrior, a counselor, and a friend, which what a godly man should be. A friend of God, a leader in his home, a warrior in the world, attacking things that are coming into his house that need to be taken care of, because if they are not taken care of, they will destroy the home. And a mentor, because people need to learn, people need to figure out what's out there, what can destroy the home of every single last one of us. And we really have to be that friend as well, because if we are not that friend, people will not come to us to be that counselor. People will not see compassion in us to help them in their struggles. And that's pretty much all I was going to say. Do you guys have any more comments before I do the outro?
I think pretty much we only hit the surface
We did.
of it. I am not a wise man at all. I'm still learning. So that's what I have to say about my part.
I'd have to say the most important thing, if you only take one piece away from this, is to always be responsible, no matter what the circumstances in life. When you have problems in life, become responsible for them. And through becoming responsible, you will become a better person.
All right, those were very good points. And now I'm just going to do the outro. Go seek truth and be truth seekers out in this world.